All right, well, welcome to the third annual Founders Panel. I suppose there's probably something witty I could say about that, but it's day 5 here at Black Cat, so you get what you get. I'm Bryson, I'm the founder and CEO of SCYTHE, and I am joined by...
Now I have it. Hi, I'm Debbie Gordon, founder of CloudRange.
And I'm Jake Williams. I previously founded, Rendition InfoSec, and was a founding member of BreachQuest, and neither of those exist anymore.
Which perfectly tees up the fact that what we're going to do that's different than the traditional Founders Panel is everything that has gone wrong, right? Not the, hey, gumdrops and unicorns, but what can we learn from the mistakes that we've made? I think there's a special talent to being an entrepreneur. Certainly it's borderline on insanity, but the two qualities that I always point to is, first of all, passion. You need to be doing something that it's not about chasing money. It is an idea that the fact that it doesn't exist bothers you so much that that's the only thing that's going to put you up through all of the very, very difficult ups and downs and challenges you go through. And then the second is the tolerance for bullshit. Because at the end of the day, while we all see us doing all the fun things up at the top and getting to do these kinds of panels, it is the duck below the water of administrivia. I mean, I now know health insurance in every single state in this country. I promise you, I have zero interest in knowing how health insurance works in every state in this country, but it's part of the job. And so I think it really does take a special breed of human, and I think us humanizing that even more through all of the trials, tribulations, and travails that we have been through only makes it better. And so I guess since you have the mic, Jake, we'll start with you. What is one of the most difficult things you learned on your journey?
Ooh, most difficult things I learned on my journey. I guess if I had to break it into two most difficult things, I think one, it's founder fit, right? If you're founding with other people, you can get together and it's really easy to go jam on an idea and be like, heck yes, we're going to go change the world. This is going to be awesome. But there's a people aspect to that as well. If you, for instance, don't view, how you deal with employee relations, for instance, or what have you. If you don't view that the same as your other founders, the idea can be awesome, right? But you're going to spend a lot of time butting heads, and as you mentioned before, right? It's a grind, right? And so you can't have stuff distracting from that. I think the other thing the other big thing that I learned along the way is that the people that you need day one are not the same people. Like the person you need in a CTO role, or when it's 5 people, right, is not the same person you need when you have 50 people, and it's not the same person breaking well above that is outside of my experience there. But I presume as you continue to grow, it's also not the same person, and so that leads to really difficult conversations that. Again, if I can turn back the clock, I'm having a lot of those conversations a lot earlier, instead of saying, oh, this person's been very loyal, right? I know, we both serve, right? Loyalty is it's a big thing, right? And so I think that was it was definitely one of the big things that I screwed up was not quickly identifying, hey, you were great when we were 10 people, but you either need to be in a brand new role now, right? And probably with less overall authority, or even just you're just not right for the company anymore, right? And so, being able to recognize that, again, hindsight's always 20/20, right? Being able to recognize that early, I think, is critical. Let me hand it over to you, Debbie.
Thanks. So, lots of lessons learned. CloudRange is my third and a half company. The half is because one was a spinoff of a previous one that I built. And there's so much, but number one, the business of the business is the easy part. So, that idea that we all work on and, jam on and get excited about, and the product, that's the easy part of the business. It's the other stuff. It's the culture. It's the competition. It's HR. It's,
Wait, why did
regulation.
I get pointed to when we talk about HR?
You were talking about, sorry, call HR. You were talking about understanding payroll. I mean, everything, it's all on the founder. Mm-hmm. And that's not necessarily what is our collectively highest and best use. everyone has the things that they're really good at, the things that bring them energy, and the things that are valuable to the business. And when those three things converge, that is Quan. That is your perfect role. And I want everyone to think about that in what you do right now, because if you meet those three things, like, life's awesome for you and your business. You mentioned loyalty. And I love to tell people when they're like, oh, I don't want to let this person go because I'm loyal to them or they're loyal to me. And the truth of it is that no, you're scared to get rid of them because you're going to have to do the work that they're doing right now. And that's a big thing. So fire fast. I mean, this all goes to culture. Culture will build itself if you don't control it. And every single one of our companies, not just us, but every single company that you all work for, has culture. And it may seem natural, but if it's not controlled and you don't have the people with the right values, making the right decisions for the right reasons, things can go south really, really quickly. I've seen it happen, luckily not in my company, but a leader cannot take their foot off the culture gas. And you have to control it and make sure that everyone is aligning with values, and that you have to communicate what those values are and make sure everyone understands how those values are being lived, and they are not just words on the wall. They have to be lived.
Well, I don't know how to take credit for founding half a company, but I've founded 3. So I first started post-government. I created a consultancy called Grimm by myself. Target coming to us with an engagement in 2016 is what led to the idea that created SCYTHE, which I spun out, and that was my first time doing venture capital raising, because I realized I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. And it seemed like somebody who had been there, done that successfully, and was giving me money would be more likely to return my phone calls. It made sense on paper. And then I co-founded the ICS Village. So we're here at DEF CON every year with Tom Van Norman, and we are a nonprofit 501c3. So I've done a services, a product, and a nonprofit. But again, I don't know how to take credit for having done half a company. So
well, it was a spin-off of a previous one, so that's why I called it like half. It was more than a half.
And so building on what Debbie said about the business side of it, I'm going to a quick quip, which was I thought the hardest part when I first built the consultancy was getting the work and then focusing on doing the work. It never occurred to me after I've done an awesome job, or we as a team have done an awesome job doing what we scoped, contracted, and delivered, that you would pay me. People don't pay.
You absolutely have to be ready to chase people down.
You
hire a
have to.
lawyer early. If you're founding something, actually not early, hire a lawyer involved in everything, in your statements of work, and your, and then don't be afraid to call them to go start collection.
Well, and also don't be afraid to charge for your value. So many entrepreneurs in their first years or months sometimes are afraid to actually charge. Like, yeah, well, I don't know that I'm worth that much, or, especially in consulting.
Yep.
But you have to maintain your value and get it paid up front, and then you don't have to worry about AR.
And that was my first existential crisis at Grimm, was we're in the holidays, Christmas is approaching, we're about to run out of the ability to make payroll because we've had 6 clients at this point and none of them have paid. And so I pick up the phone and start the dialing for dollars to keep the company afloat, which I didn't anticipate, again, that being the hardest part. The second part, which is a little bit different on the product side with the business view, was, so you've got this idea. And I think a lot of folks know the cliche of the invented in the garage, and this seems like a good idea to me. And you know what? My friends all don't want to tell me it's a stupid idea. So then I go out, and I'm surprised nobody else is interested in the idea. And this is part of recognizing it isn't just the product itself, it's the process of the product. And I didn't appreciate this, that there is a large portion of folks out in enterprise who are looking, particularly in security, for the early stages because, one, since it's novel, because it's a new thing, it's actually going to work. It's weird, right? Because you think about the established things, but the established things become part of the test matrix that the threat is validating before they throw the malware out there. So I already know how to defeat it, whereas nobody cares about you because you have 2 clients. Nobody's testing that you don't work. The second part is they get to be a design partner. They get to be a part of the process to shape where you're going. And I didn't realize there were these people who were out there who really wanted to be interested in it, because I felt like I was uncomfortable trying to be salesy. I was uncomfortable trying to be I'm building this. Do you want to be a part of it? That just felt like this awkward thing to do. Guess what? You need to get awkward. You need to get past being awkward. You need to be pitching yourself so often you're annoying random people who aren't even in the industry because you love this so much and you're getting better at doing it that way. And so that was the frustrating part, is when I came up with this idea of Scythe from the conversation. We called it Project Crossbow, actually, which was a play off of Target. And I thought, all right, well, we're building this, we're co-developing with them. I know what we're building. Surely if I go and explain to other people this is what I'm building, they're going to get it. Nobody got it. I don't mean like there was one person who like potentially was like, that wasn't the worst conversation ever. I mean, nobody understood anything I was saying. I felt like I'd come from another planet and was trying to describe how we did wheels on Mars. Nobody understood anything I was saying because I didn't understand it isn't the engineering approach of describing what you build. No one cares. No one cares. No one cares what you built. It's what can it do for me? Which means you, as that budding entrepreneur building that thing, you need to go and have the conversation on like, what are your problems? What are you trying to solve? And then using their understanding, their priorities, their language back into what you're trying to do. And that took me about 3 years to painfully learn.
Can I jump in here real quick? One of the things that you just said, Debbie, a minute ago was fantastic. Don't be afraid to charge, for what you're worth, especially early on and especially in consulting. Oh my gosh! But again, another big thing that I learned that, man, I wish I'd known years ago, was that lost leads are always loss and almost never lead.
Explain
right?
what a lost lead is.
Yeah, so for folks not familiar, a lost lead in the industry is basically you giving something for free or giving some value out, right, that you hope then turns into a sale, right, that you're then getting. And sometimes lost leads take a lot of different forms, right? There's, it's free. Sometimes it's so heavily discounted it might as well be free. You're doing like an assessment at cost, right, or providing some service directly at cost because you're gonna make it all back on the flip side, and the flip side almost never happens, right? Just almost never happens, right? No matter how sure of a thing you feel like it is, getting that money up front and getting the money up front, but getting that money conversation going up front. This is what the service costs, because you're basically then qualifying clients, right? Are they in a position to, both financially in a position to procure your services or product down the road, but also are they willing to, right? Because if they can't have that conversation, at least in the hypothetical, there's no way you're converting them 2 or 3 months from now, even when they see how great you're doing and how, anyway, that's lost so much money. I mean, just like literal monumental amounts of money on fire, playing the whole lost lead game over the years. And again, I can count on one hand the number of times that it turned anything out, and, definitely a net negative over time, So,
not everybody solo founds. Sometimes we found with other folks. And there's different mistakes and challenges that can be done in that. So tying to experiences between being a founder, being part of a founding team.
So I've been a solo founder for most, and then this most recent one, I had a kind of later entering co-founder who was kind of consulting behind the scenes for the first couple of years. And there's something that, there's pros and cons. It's very lonely at the top, and it's nice to have, when one is weak, the other one pushes up. You balance each other off. But it is imperative to make sure you are going in the same direction, because if you start here and you have 1 degree off, you are here. And you have to make sure that this doesn't separate at all, or it can be detrimental. So having a partner is amazing. They just have to be the right person and be aligned, and then you can figure out how to get there. You know where you're going, and you both can figure out how to get there.
So I probably have a little bit of a different take on this, and again, this is from just negative experience, right, in that space. What Debbie said is 100% correct, right? You start looking at this little tiny difference in direction, right? And we talk about this in land navigation in the military all the time, right? You're off just by a couple of degrees, and suddenly over a couple of kilometers, you're way outside of where you're supposed to be, right? I'm not sure that, when we get into product in particular, right, I'm not sure that you truly have founding partners. To the extent that you do, it's my personal belief that the only way to really make that work is that there is somebody that literally is saying the buck stops here, right? This is the direction we're going, and then making sure that the other founder or founders on the team, are then in agreement that whoever makes that decision, right? And again, it's by all means, right? If you want to play the racy chart, right? By all means, let's get everybody consulted. But at the end of the day, there's someone making the decision, and then once that decision is made, everybody else locks in behind it, right? Because I can tell you that I've experienced the opposite of that, right? Where it's like lots of design by committee, right? And then you've got, again, people moving in different directions, or even in the worst case, right? Where, like there's an explicit discussion around, yes, there's a decider, this is the decision, this is where we're moving, and everybody nods, and then, somebody else goes and moves in the other direction. And it's catastrophic, especially early stage, right, to an organization, because, again, your product ends up, Anyway, your product ends up horrible. So, all that said.
Yeah, I was curious how you were going to answer that.
Very diplomatically.
I noticed. That's why I was impressed.
Yeah.
So both my for-profit companies, I was the solo founder. With the consultancy, that wasn't really a thing, but it was interesting when I decided that we needed to do a venture capital raise. And they have this model. And I mean, it's fascinating. It's like, for example, like we're talking about millions of dollars. You will make that decision in a 30-minute pitch to the investment board. They all do that. It's like, it is a 30-minute pitch. That's it. You are not allowed more than 30 minutes. And I'm kind of like, that seems like an arbitrary thing. And I can remember one that went poorly where part of the board, because VCs don't just necessarily invest in like cybersecurity only. So I remember one of the guys on the board was like an orthopedic surgeon. And so in part of my 30 minutes, I had to explain cybersecurity to him as a fundamental concept, which really kind of takes away from the ability to explain the idea at all. They passed, as you might have imagined, because it was part of the confusion in it. But one of the things that came up over and over again was they were kind of like, well, you're a solo founder. We don't really like solo founders. And I'm like, I mean, I don't know how to go backwards in time and have somebody else been a part of that. What's the deal? And the way they like to bracket it, as I understand, is there's the technical founder, right? There's the nerd. We got it. He or she's the nerd. And then this is the business founder, and he or she is the business person. And we can clearly identify the two archetypes because they physically represent as two different human beings. Bryson, why are you not schizophrenic enough to do that? And it was a constant criticism, and I just sort of was like, I don't know what else I'm supposed to do here. I'm already along this path. And it was really awkward when I was at the A round, which again, now the company has been in operation for 5 years, and I'm supposed to produce a technical co-founder for you. Like, and it was this constant criticism that I couldn't process or really do anything about. But it was built into the ecosystem of just, this is the model, you don't match it, therefore, we're not going to do this. And so, again, I don't know what I would have done differently, but it's an area where I just wish I'd had an opportunity to have had that technical co-founder, although, yes, it is a partnership. It's like a marriage. Only the difference is you don't have sex to bring it back together, hopefully.
Wow, already. Can I grab the mic here for a second?
Yeah.
Look, and I think that actually, yeah.
That was funny.
Yeah, so
you can laugh, okay?
Rapidly pivot.
Laugh track. Press the laugh track.
Rapidly pivoting away from that. But no, I do like the idea of the business and the geek archetype there, or nerd, whatever the appropriate term is. I think that actually works. I think that can actually work really well. Again, the big, because there I think you do have a central or a single really product driver, as it were. And by the way, it probably shouldn't be the nerd, right? If we're going to come down to brass tacks, the number one thing that kills companies is not a lack of innovation or product, or I say product, advancements or whatever. It's money. It's lack of money. And so the business person is the one that honestly, one, is probably far enough away from the it's not their baby, right? And probably should be the one driving the bus there. But 100% agree with you. I would, again, well, I'd happily do something with a co-founder, not another technical co-founder, right? Trying to drive the bus along with. So yeah.
Yeah, well, that's that balance in that relationship. We're gonna narrow this down to a product question because services sort of organically solves itself quickly, but in product market fit, understanding of this term called total addressable market. And so this is when you're first with the idea, you have no idea what total addressable market is, right? It's the potential money that is out there that's tied to your product. And the way most founders do this, and I probably did, I don't remember, so many years ago, is kind of like, well, we're like Uber, that's $10 billion a year, and if we can just get, I don't know, like 1% of that, look, I just made $100 million. Who wouldn't want to invest in that idea? That's not how it works at all, right? And so where I'm going to is, what are some mistakes that you've made along product development? Now, hopefully, we've corrected them along the way, but where you were wrong in terms of understanding what the market was, who the ideal customer profile was, going back to charging what you're worth, what they would pay for a product.
My company, Cloud Range, does virtual cyber ranges. So it's a training and enablement and readiness platform for security analysts to be able to proactively prepare, like a flight simulator, but for cyber attacks. So from the beginning, on the back of the napkin, one of our target markets were managed security service providers because they are basically a SOC for many companies. So end user enterprise SOCs, but then actually the MSSPs too. Why wouldn't they be a great customer? So I would have put money on that they would have been 80% of our business by now. And it turns out that, if you look at take any company, Acme Manufacturing, and they have a cybersecurity department, business unit, or department, not even a business unit because it's not revenue generating. That's just part of operating the company. Whereas an MSSP is in the business of cybersecurity, so their finances are different. And so what they want to do is maximize their revenue and not spend any money on being able to do that. So they want to have their cost of goods sold be as little as possible, no matter how much they needed the service. So we would get, from the CEOs, we need this so much. And then there were private equity roll-ups of these companies. We need this so much, but no one would buy it because it would cut into their margins because that's the business that they're in. And that was an eye-opener, like huge, because I'm hearing this, that they all need it from their own mouths. But then at the other side of their mouth, they say, we can't really justify spending any money because that cuts into our gross margins. And so that was a big lesson learned. I mean, in general, too, if you build it, they will not necessarily come. That is the thing. People, especially super technical founders, they think, I've got this great thing, and people are going to want it because it's cool and it does X, Y, Z. Well, what is it worth? So you were talking about outcomes. What is this thing going to do for you? How do you measure the value of that thing that it does for you in dollars? And then how does the price of your product actually compare to that? And so that's how to determine value and product market fit. Does it solve a problem? And will businesses or individuals part with their money to buy it? And is it going to be valuable? And just one last point, even if it is, and you get that product market fit, in our company we measure we call it our North Star KPI. It's like the be-all, end-all key performance indicator, which is renewals. It's not sales, it's renewals. Because we may have sold it, we may have delivered it, but if they don't see the value, they're not going to return. If we don't make it sticky, they're not going to return. So that is it. It's not sales. I mean, sales starts, you have to have sales to have renewals, but that is the ultimate indicator.
Yeah, so you said something I think that is really, really key there, and it's not just, do you have a great idea? Is it something that will drive value? But will your target customer pay for it? Mm-hmm. So in the failed product startup that I had, or that I worked with, 10 out of 10 CISOs, we actually went and we have lots of access, but multiple founders with lots of access in the industry, no shortage of getting in front of CISOs. That the getting in front of people to pitch the product and talk about is this a good idea? Easy, right? And we. Oh no, it was an absolute luxury. Yeah. By the way, this is not humble brag. It just
I didn't have that either.
It was just a reality, right? And it was it was great. And so, early on, and in particular, we even brought some of this data, to the 30-minute investor pitches, which are very often 20 minutes because one of the VCs is late and you name it, whatever. But yes. But alas, we brought that data. We're like, yeah, 100% of everyone we talk to at CISOs, they're like, this is definitely a good capability. This is something I would like to have. But that's not the critical question. It's, will you buy it, right? Because when we turn back around to some of those same CISOs, right, with a very early stage capability that drove, drove 80 plus, we all know the 80-20 rule, right? 80% plus of the, the value. It's like, at what price would you buy this? And like, and it wasn't like we were wildly off on pricing. They just weren't ready to separate from, or basically give us any of their budget, right, to cover the problem. So while they simultaneously agreed, and we kind of went back and said, but you still see this as an unsolved problem in your, in your organization. They're like, oh yeah, totally, right? But now the follow-up of, are you ready to pay to solve that problem, was no, because we have other bigger problems to solve. And so early on, you got to start asking the hard question of, is this something that you're going to buy? And then very quickly, at what price, right?
Yeah, so if you read business books, everybody lauds innovation. You want to be innovative. Innovation. Innovation sucks. From a product perspective, it means I'm building something that doesn't exist. Okay, cool. How hard can that be, right? I'm just going to go and convince you how brilliant the thing is. And you know what? Let's walk through the perfect scenario. I meet you. You're like, I love it. This is great. But since I've never heard of the idea, I'm already in the budget cycle, so I don't have a budget for it, right? So greatest idea ever, best thing since sliced bread, love it. Next year.
Maybe.
Again, we're going best case. Best case is you possibly have a 6 to 18 month deal cycle. That's the best case. Now multiply that by how many best cases you need to have. That's innovation. Again, they don't even know what you have. Now they do. Now they're like, I want it. When will I be able to get it? That's when I can first budget for it. That is your best case chance. The reality most likely is like what you talked about, which is, I like it, but I mean, this doesn't fit into my priorities.
Right.
And you can't just change priorities, right? We agreed, because this all the way went from the board to the CISO, right through. These are the 3 priorities we're working this year. And you kind of really can't, as an organization, do more than 3 priorities. And so the other thing that I've learned, and I continue to see other people learning this the painful way, we're not really in a technical business.
Right.
We are in a people business. The reason IT exists is because it scales what people can do. And a modern business can't operate at the efficiency and scale without that IT. But it's around users, and it's around people who are making decisions. And those decisions, particularly when it comes to security, there's a lot of psychology to it. There's a lot of fear and guessing and whatnot. So this is where innovation doesn't really fit into it. And so one of the things I learned, and then I'll really lead to where I really made a mistake, was I call it the line. The largest budget in any organization whose purpose is to make money is toward the thing that makes the money. I know, novel concept, right? That's where we spend our money, is actually running the company. And so that's where the line starts. And that's going to be less than the amount we make, hopefully, because that's what a profitable company is. Otherwise, they're definitely not buying anything because they're not making money. Then there's a line. And the scope, the slant of that line, the slope of the line, goes to IT, and that's going to be a fraction of that budget. Typically, you're looking at 5 to 10% of the operational budget will be for IT. Now keep following that line. And again, the slope will change based on the vertical. Like manufacturing, it's going to probably go like this. Finance is going to go more like that. And then there's security. And by the way, when we're talking about security, we're talking about core operational security, right? The blue team, Security Operations Center, which is anywhere probably from about 3 to 10% of the 5 to 10% of IT, which is of the operational budget. Now you get into innovation and niche things, which is where SCYTHE was. So we are now somewhere down here on the line. And if there's not enough budget here, then they don't even exist. There's no budget for it. That line and those relationships are inviolate. You can't spend more on security than you do on IT. You can't spend more on IT than you do on operations of what makes you money. That never changes. All you can do is try to understand what does that look like against the ideal customers and the verticals you're selling to. So where this gets to, where I learned the hard way, is I built something that was intentionally all the way over here. And it was even worse than that. I was talking about total addressable market. My total addressable market for what we originally built at SCYTHE is $0. $0. Now, how, Bryson, did you start to build an idea and spend millions of dollars from what we were building at Grimm into building something that was $0? Because I built a red team product. Now, most people at this point have heard of red teaming. If you're in security, you've heard of red teaming. It seems like there's a lot of red teaming. There's a lot of these conferences. In fact, there's even a halo effect to the psychology of like, I want to be one of the sexy offensive people. It's $3 billion of nerds you consult and hire, or your own nerds internally. And they get no product budget. So if you're building a product for that $3 billion market, their budget is $0 for you. The market is $0. That was the biggest strategic mistake. And it took me several years to learn that, again, I could peel off little pieces. And so this tied into the next mistake I made, which is I thought, all right, let's try to cultivate an expert ecosystem. Because if I can't sell to enterprise because that budget's $0, at least I can provide a tech-enabled service to those consultancies to make their lives easier. Because offense is hard. Offense is really hard. It's part of why it's niche. And so I thought, well, by selling at these lower price points, which is the only thing consultants can afford, by the way, so I'm already going to a discount because I'm trying to bring them in. But you know what? Because my platform is modular, they'll build their own things, and then we can all share those with each other. That sounds like a joke. It actually turned out to not work that way at all. Nobody wanted to share everything. No, that's my special sauce. And so not only did I approach a greater market of $0, me trying to then attack another smaller piece to get something, that was also an effective return of $0 as well.
Yeah, I mean, so look, I remember actually being at the at RSA, right, when you launched the SCYTHE marketplace, right, I remember. Please don't laugh, anyone who's old enough in security to remember HB Gary, but I remember the HB Gary experience there too, right? We did the same thing, right? Had a marketplace.
Greg texted me yesterday, actually.
What's that?
Greg Hoagland texted me yesterday.
Yeah, no joke. Yeah, I kid you not, spoke with him like last week. So yes, which was weird because
he texted me out of nowhere. I was
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So Greg is HB Gary, but alas, you know. One of the things that I observed in both cases, and please don't take this as a knock, right, is marketplaces, and bringing together community and building, thinking you're going to build like this big modular framework with plugins. That is a huge distractor from your core, from your core development, right? Because you have to then have these rock solid plugin interfaces and some of the boneheaded mistakes, right, that people, that people make, right, crash your product, which means then you've got to be defensive around the code that's getting loaded into your product, or you end up in a situation like poor Microsoft, right, who deals with this all the time, where you get a blue screen of death. And,
or recently.
Right. Oh, sure. Right. Yeah. So, okay. Yeah.
This is CrowdStrike week,
yes,
everybody.
CrowdStrike. Yes. But no joke, right? What is it? I think the stat is something like 95% of blue screens aren't Microsoft's fault. It's a third-party driver. Your average consumer turns around, right? Even your average technical consumer turns around. They say a blue screen, and they're like, "Effing Microsoft," right? And SCYTHE crashes, or the HB Gary responder product crashes. And they're like, "Freaking SCYTHE, freaking." And so all of a sudden, right, this thing that sounds great, right, turns around and it's sapping the life out of it, because now you're not working on features, right? You're hoping that you build it and they'll come. Meanwhile, you're doing a ton of self-defense, you're doing a ton of customer service, you're doing, I say self-defense, meaning, programming these interfaces to try to make sure that the boneheaded developer writing a plugin for your ecosystem basically isn't destroying your credibility in the market, right? So anyway, hats off to you for trying, and But again, now having seen at least fairly close up, right, much closer in the HB Gary case, 2 for 2, not something I'll be pursuing. So,
do you want to pile on?
Nope.
I wasn't piling on. I was just saying.
I'm teasing. No,
it's something that sounds fantastic. I mean, you were talking to me.
Yeah.
You're like, dude, write a module, and you guys sent. I'll grab the mic here just so we're on. Yeah, you're like, hey, I mean, again, I was at the launch party, right? You're like, write a module. I had.
We tried bounties. We tried different kind of incentives. We tried different kinds of training. We tried different kinds of I mean, the amount of work it takes to get a bunch of non-invested folks to be invested,
Right.
not only to invest, but to share and to work all of that together. I mean, again, this is where you can academically point to, we can only solve cybersecurity together.
Right.
Don't try to do it as a startup.
Yeah. Well, but
my
I mean,
mistake.
even to that end, right? Like, I was kind of sold on the idea, right? And then said, okay, well, now let's look at the SDK. And what came across was, I mean, again, like, it's something that it's very difficult to invest, kind of to your point, right? To invest time and resourcing and whatever, until there's a really, really mature SDK. And by the way, folks, Microsoft is still screwing this up to this day because half of their, half, maybe that's an exaggeration, but a large number of their code samples in the SDK have bugs in them themselves, right? And so, once I saw the SDK, I'm like, ooh, I don't know now. This might be so again, but that's this tremendous both time and resource suck to make that work that's competing with actual feature development that's going to turn a sale, right? So, yeah, anyway, sorry.
So have you faced a similar problem with your range environment with the kind of flexibility that you need to give to customers without them hanging themselves and blaming you?
We have designed it so that they don't have to do any of that. So we made it where it's just configurable for most use cases, and we're staying ahead of what those use cases are.
So you went with the Apple approach.
Yes.
Yep. Here you go,
Yes.
turn it on. You don't need to know what's going on under the system.
Right. Yeah, they don't need to do any development.
Yeah, that was another thing that I learned on the feature side was you think that you want to be as flexible as possible. You want to offer as many features. You don't. Mm-hmm. Customers want you to tell them what to do for the most part.
Yeah.
And actually simplifying the experience is a better experience, which it sounds like what you did.
Yeah. Well,
Where were you 7 years ago to have helped me?
that just reminded me of something. So our lead technical expert was on a call with a customer, and a prospect, I should say, and he said afterwards, "Oh, Debbie, we're going to need to do XYZ because they asked if we could do XYZ," and I said, "Did they say they need XYZ, or did they simply ask if you can do XYZ?" And he said, "No, they just asked if we could do XYZ." I go, "That person just likes to hear themselves think and talk, and they don't really need that." So he was ready to change our whole model so we can do this custom integration. And I'm like, they don't need that. He was just asking, can you? Like, curiosity. It doesn't mean we need it. Mm-hmm. So we also have to always train our customers. Remember, we do what we do for a living. This is what we do every day. Our customers have jobs. Like, they're doing something else. They don't stay up at night thinking about Cloud Range. I stay up at night thinking about them all the time, but they're not thinking about me. And so we need to guide them in how to buy our solution. We can't wait for them to tell us how they think they want to buy it because they don't know because they never bought it before.
So I've got a question here that I'm most interested in hearing you. I think I know your answer already just based on us working together. But if a customer comes to you and says, I need you to develop this new feature that's never been asked for by anybody else, right? You need to develop this new feature, and then you've got a sale. Do you develop it?
Well, if they need it, there's a chance that others need it. So that's when we would go to our customer advisory board and we'd say, what do you think about it? Every single feature that we have was because customers need it. And it was invented by a person either on our end in the mind, invented in the mind by somebody on our end, or an idea that a customer said, can you do this? And they actually had a good idea. And back to the whole be a partner with your customers, like they want to help us be successful because they know we're innovating and they want to contribute to that. Well, I'm going to do two things. I'm either going to get affirmation that the market does need that and that's a valuable feature, or I am going to convince that customer that they don't actually need it. Because if they need it and nobody else needs it, they don't really need it. And I'm going to convince them of that. I will not do it for them and sell it to them to get the business, because that's tons of cost and opportunity cost for us to spend the time doing that as a one-off. So I will take the other approaches of convince them that they don't need it, or validate and affirm that it's needed universally.
So I think the maturity and growth of the company answers that as well. So first, I'll give a shout out to George Orchias. So when he was at Citigroup, I had just met him at DerbyCon, which is where we came up with the idea around the C2 matrix, because we both had a similar challenge on how do we teach offense while at the same time not tying to a for-profit product, because that's key to being able to teach. Otherwise, you come across as a shill. And so I built a relationship, and he was in a position there which matched the kind of ICP that I was looking for. And so I went with him. I was like, hey, here's what I built. And he's like, this sucks. Like, thank you. That's actually helpful, right? How does it suck? What can I do? And I got a list, and I sat down with the development team, and we came back 3 months later, and he was like, all right, you made some progress, still need these things. And then I came back, and he's like, this is now something that I would find interesting. And so that was very valuable, because it was more clear design partner feedback to drive us at a very early stage in what we were doing, because you're so hungry for any kind of real world feedback that's real world and valuable. Now, the answer would be that's going to now be more of a customer advisory board. That's going to be, where does that fit into our product roadmap and our strategy? You know, I don't want to chase AI. I don't see the inherent value of that to a customer. So I'm not going to just do that because you're like, well, can you do AI? And that's really hard, I think, a lot for engineers and developers who don't get as much of a chance to hear a customer call and a customer use case. And when they do, and they hear that, and they're like, well, we can or we want to, doesn't mean you should.
Right.
But those are two different levels of maturity you have to earn, where you know yourself, you know your market well enough where you can, in fact, push back like that. But I didn't start there. We collectively earned our way there.
Yeah. But that's not to say that when you start a company, you will not change your ways to get some money in the door. And I mean, not necessarily build a new feature, but we did early on. We were approached by a very large technology company in Saudi Arabia, and they wanted us to do this custom curriculum for a 2-month training program for workforce development, and they would use our range, but they wanted us to build all this curriculum, and that's not the business we're in. But they were going to pay us a lot of money to do that, and we took their money that they paid us to do it, and I had one of my engineers doing training for the whole time, basically in the middle of the night, to meet that. And he resigned like 6 months later. I mean, not surprising, but we, sometimes you just got to do what you got to do.
Well, I think there's a good, to that point, right? What I said earlier, and I know everybody up here agrees with it, number one thing that kills companies is like running out of money, right? So when you have the opportunity and, there's something there, by all means, right? Take it. I love what you said about the engineer, though, right? Like working somebody too hard. I'm putting words in your mouth there, but when somebody burns out, like that cost, especially for a smaller organization, is I can share with you my product startup that failed. We had a beyond many other issues, we had a key engineer that basically had it up to here one day, and 6 months into development, walked out the door. It was, I don't want to say a lethal blow, but it was the kind of thing that, he's a key person. It would have hurt any organization, but when your number of engineers is in single digits, it was, and he was what was the Twitter joke for a while, the 10x engineer. Like, he was the 10x engineer, right? And so it had a 10x multiplier effect when he walked out the door. And in hindsight, there were so many things that we could have done to have stopped that, right? And didn't do them because we were focused on, got to hit those, those milestones, and again, in the long run, we ended up missing more milestones because we pushed so hard to hit some of the, So again, it was one of those very, very short term. Really thinking short term rather than really looking holistically and thinking long term about staff attrition, which was, again, not all staff created equally, right? You can't coddle everybody, but this is definitely someone that, in hindsight, absolutely should have been coddled, right? So, yeah.
So I think we got time for one question from the audience.
I was just going to ask on the person who was giving you advisory feedback on your solution, were they compensated, or would you expect to compensate them? Would they expect to be compensated for that type of feedback?
In this case, they were not, but there's also a conflict of interest because they were in that professional fiduciary responsibility for the financial institution. So them charging to a vendor to, potential vendor into an RFP would be a conflict of interest.
Selfishly, I ask because I get approached by a lot of product companies for input and feedback, and it's like, I should get something for this instead of just giving free advice. What do you think?
That's what an advisory board is. So you can have a board of directors who are investors or maybe some independents, but they make, formal decisions. And then you can have an advisory board of just industry experts to help you answer the question, and you can give them some options. And then you can have a customer advisory board, which are actual customer users who are giving you feedback and you're learning from and helping your roadmap.
So we did eventually build an advisory board, and we comped them with options in the company. All right. Well, anything you want to leave the audience with to forever be memorialized for screwing up?
Yeah, I mean, again, like gut feel, right? Actually, you know what? If I'm going to come down to, how about probably one of the most important things as a founder is to find somebody outside your business that actually understands your business and understands the nuance, who you can go to for counsel. I'll also note that counsel's only good when you listen to them. And so, anyway, so yes.
Hire really smart people that are smarter. And I will tell you, I've had both. Like my last company, just because of the structure of it, I was very lonely. I didn't have an executive team. The company did great, but it was a lot of people doing physical asset management of data centers. So as an executive, it was lonely. But they say never be the smartest person in the room. Unfortunately, in that company, I was. And I say unfortunately because I didn't have other people contributing. It was all me. This company, I have such smart people that know stuff that I don't, and they make me feel lighter. Like, instead of weighing on me and they bring me problems, they tell me solutions, and they manage me and help manage how we go, and it's a beautiful thing.
So I'm in year number 8, and I've just now started to figure this out and implement this, which is how important transparency and communication is with your investors and your board. And if that sounds obvious, it's harder than it sounds, because you don't want to tell the investors, like, well, actually, we missed our numbers. Like, oh, don't worry, you keep trying to, we're almost there. Because there is a lot of, it does feel like you're kind of almost about to do X, Y, Z. And so I learned, and I really, actually, I'm going to give credit out to Seth at SAS Ventures, where I went to their founders conference, and we talked about that, and I went to him afterwards, and I was like, all right, I now write a 4 to 6 page paper to my investors every quarter. That level of detail, numbers, exactly what we are. There is no surprise in everything. You know exactly what we did, you know the details behind it, you know what the risks are, you know what we think we're gonna do, and you get that regularly now. And I started with having to learn how to do that, and I went to him, I've now done it twice, where I put my draft together, and the first draft he tore up and was it was pages of questions. The second one, there were a lot fewer, because I got a lot better at now not only thinking of, because I'm so much in the middle of it, now realizing where they're not, right? They're not staying up thinking about me and SCYTHE all the time.
Tell them only what they need to know and nothing more.
And so I was now trying to extrapolate what are the natural questions this is going to raise and starting to answer that proactively. And then one of the other things in parallel is I have to do a quarterly board meeting, but it doesn't mean I only have to meet with my board directors on a quarterly basis. And it's a lot easier when you go into the quarterly board meeting, which is a big legal thing, when I'm meeting with them regularly as well in a more in-depth, constant thing. So there are no surprises, and they're now a part of that. And it's year number 8 before I figured out that level of commitment to transparency. Well, Jake and Debbie, on behalf of everyone, thank you.
Thank you.